are talking about the movie The Headhunter. No, this is not a remake of the 1988 horror movie, although there are horror elements to this film. This one is also known as Viking Vengeance, directed by Jason Downey and stars Christopher Rygh. It's actually kind of a fantasy movie with a kind of a Nordic / Viking twist to it. Now when I tell you this story, it's going to sound like a fantastic medieval adventure, but there's a little asterisk on this. This one actually kind of reminds me of a cross between Beowulf and Valhalla Rising, though I was also reminded of a movie I reviewed a little while ago called The Doors of Demerel, which is kind of had a Lord of the Rings aesthetic but simply didn't have the budget to really kind of have any type of scale in it. So the story here focuses on this warrior who is unnamed and he's just kind of this burly kind of Viking type. And we see through a variety of flashbacks that he's had a daughter at some point that we are led to believe has been killed by some type of monster, although it's not actually seen. And he's just kind of like this warrior that seems to be some type of monster hunter. And we know this because you see him display a large number of kind of monster heads on this kind of like trophy wall almost. And there is a kind of a city, like a medieval city nearby, that blows this kind of horn that kind of calls him into action, ultimately to try to call him to defeat a variety of different kind of monsters that seem to threaten the city and its people. And he goes off there and then dispatches the variety of monsters in hopes of ultimately one day crossing paths with the monster that killed his daughter. Now that sounds like it will be an epic kind of monster smackdown fantasy movie horror hybrid, doesn't it? And yes, that does sound like it would be what you'd expect. However, the pitch of this film, I can imagine, went something along the lines of this. So yeah, we want to do this kind of this monster hunter movie. That would be really great. So we can have lots of different monsters. Well, yes, but we're never going to see them. What? Yeah, we're never going to see any monsters. All we'll ever see is him coming back from these kind of hunts and with a kind of a bag containing some type of monster head and display that on his wall. We'll never actually see any of the monsters. All right, but we're going to see some type of battles, aren't we? No, not really. We'll have one kind of small battle in it, but it's very kind of a little bit odd, which we'll come on to, but no actual battles in it as well. No, we're just going to come back after he's had the battles with these monsters that you'll never see. So what is it we're going to see then? Well, we're going to see him organising his house. We're going to see him taking a bath. We're going to see him talk to his daughter's grave. We're going to see him chopping wood. And yeah, but then he's going to go off to these, going to hunt these monsters, and the film's going to cut away, and he comes back, rinse and repeat. Weird. This is like the cinematic equivalent of Blue Balls, really. But there is some stuff to say here that are a positive. So the director, Jordan Downey, and his team have made a very artistic and visually stunning film. So the cinematography here really is very, very good. I mean, this film is incredibly well shot. And there really are some fantastic vistas with this kind of snowy Nordic wilderness. It really does evoke the kind of a kind of Game of Thrones feel and a kind of a Vikings kind of vibe to it. So that I really appreciate. And it kind of looks like it's very well photographed, very well kind of framed. The sound design here is excellent. There's some fantastic sound effects. And the other thing I always say really kind of stands out for me is some of the kind of the sets, but also the props that they've used, and also the kind of the practical makeup. So we see this guy, and he's got all his armour, and then it looks cool, and he has this kind of beat up kind of cabin with all kind of weird shit in it, and it looks very good. It looks very kind of rustic, very kind of authentic, very kind of like downtrodden. His armour looks cool and battered and everything, and the guy they cast looks very much a Viking type. And then we see him actually kind of tend to a lot of kind of wounds after he's come back, and the actual prosthetics that they've used that looks incredibly good. And he kind of uses some type of magic potion that ultimately kind of heals him. So there is some good aspects in regards to kind of practical effects and kind of model making and stuff like that. So that was all very good. And I actually feel that they may have used kind of real like bones and carcasses and stuff like that and offal to create a lot of kind of like gore effects. Now the actual acting is a tough one to say, because I've seen a lot of people praise the acting here, but this is really only a one-man show. There's no dialogue with anyone else. He talks to his daughter's grave for a little bit, but we never actually see this guy interact with anyone. So it's hard to judge acting, to be honest with you, when you don't really have a kind of an emotional counterfoil to kind of play against. So it's a hard movie to judge in regards to acting, because there's virtually just nearly 99% of it's just physical acting. And yeah, that all looks good, but I can't really say the acting here was great, because there's a lot of the time he's kind of hidden behind this massive armour and helmet and big beard. Yeah, it looks okay, but like I've said, the acting, I can't really say you can really judge it the same way you would do in a lot of films. So there's a lot kind of like visually, I feel, here that works. But let's look about what doesn't work. Okay, before we kind of get on to the obvious, for me, one thing I found a little bit disconcerting was the lack of world building here. I mean, you're just kind of thrown in. I mean, you don't actually see the daughter get kind of killed. We just have to kind of piece it together and stuff like that. But we have no idea about the actual world that this kind of character inhabits, basically. So it's kind of a little jarring. Now, this is by design, I feel. It's just kind of thrown you in here. Yep, we just got to kind of accept that this is some type of world where there's all these kind of weird monsters roaming around. We don't know anything about the kind of the world, that's kind of society. It just is. So that's obviously a decision that was made by the filmmakers here. But I feel because of that, you kind of feel like you're a bit like unattached to the kind of the characters, because you don't know the world that they're living in. And in the same breath, because we barely see his daughter, again, as an audience member, we don't feel necessarily that attached, because we haven't built this as an audience member. We haven't built this relationship. We're just told he's lost a daughter, and that's very sad and everything. But we, as an audience member, haven't experienced that. It's just some guy who barely talks. And then the decision, obviously, like I've said, to really cut any of the action over this movie. Now, our main antagonist, we do get somewhat of I don't want to say even a fight, but it's more of a face-off, literally, towards the end, but not really like a battle like you're going to be expecting. Let me just put it like that more, but we're going to come on to that again in just a second. So this movie is a lot of time just doing mundane things. So it's an odd film in regards to it seems to spend a lot of time on the mundane and virtually have nothing on the fantastic. And I suspect most people would be expecting the other way around, to have a lot of kind of like fantasy elements actually in the film, and really not have the kind of the artistic-y mundane shots of him doing chores, which is what we get. Now, carrying on from that, I feel this movie is somewhat self-indulgent. So this is my speculation. I suspect this is the film that the filmmaker wanted to make. But is it the film that audiences want to see? Because that's the difference, I feel. So this is clearly the film that the writers and Jason Downey will also co-wrote this, or Jordan Downey, sorry. This is, I think, the film that he wanted to make. But I don't think it's particularly commercial because of that. If you've seen Valhalla Rising, that is the nearest film I can kind of say this is anything like, to a certain degree. Now, this might be because of budgetary constraints, but I think if you don't have the money to do something like this, it's risky kind of doing a venture where you really don't show anything. But the rest of, in regards, the odd thing here for me was the movie looks so good, and what we do see, surely some of this could have been put on screen. I feel at least you need to see at least one conflict. Now, in regards to what we do have in regards to plots, I have a little bit of an issue that the twist of it comes purely from bad housekeeping. Yeah, you've heard. I won't tell you what happens, but there's this kind of twist that happens purely by accident that is a result of disorganised housekeeping. So that, I don't know. Maybe again that's probably a design choice. It's just like, hey, the mundane can spin off to crazy things, but there you go. But it just seemed like an odd choice. And on our final conflict, this is where it kind of goes. This is the last act of the film. It kind of goes into horror territory at this point, and it very much goes into a kind of an Evil Dead style conflict. Is the best way, without spoiling anything. And it's so far removed from the kind of the gritty, realistic sort of first two acts. It seems bizarre. And when we get, there's a kind of a face-off that happens between our protagonist and our antagonist. I don't know. I found it a bit comical. I don't think it was meant to be. But what the actual end result of it is, I don't know. It just looks a bit comical because it's like Return of the Living Dead. In this movie, it's just been plopped into it, and yeah, I don't know if it worked, if I'm honest. What I did think was really interesting, and the ending here is very brave. I actually kind of liked it. I actually kind of liked the ending, but I can see it pissing some people off. I actually thought the ending was quite a brave choice, and you know, going to go to this kind of dark kind of fairy tale. And I actually quite liked it, I've got to say. I actually thought it was quite effective, but I can see some people not liking it. So this is a really interesting film because I mean, reading some of the reviews before I did this, my own review, it's one or the other. People love the artistic side of it and kind of praise it for its artistic merits and all of this, or they hate it because they just feel it's like a waste of time. And I understand both the points. The movie is actually a relatively short running time, so there is that. Now, for me, I do feel it's a missed opportunity to make more of a kind of a traditional style film. I do feel it's self-indulgent, and there's no getting around that. And the artistic design or not, I can't help but feel this is somewhat pretentious and somewhat self-indulgent. But I still actually was engaged. I don't think it's got a lot of rewatchability. But I was intrigued. I thought the actual production design was so good from what we did see. I was still kind of like switched on to it, despite the fact that really what we actually have on screen, not a lot really actually happens. So I'm actually still going to give this a 6 out of 10, purely because I feel there's a lot of skill on display here, and I don't know whether this was down to budgetary reasons or artistic reasons why we kind of get a kind of, we don't get that kind of like those moments that we were all hoping for on screen. But I still feel that there's enough there to kind of warrant it a look if you are interested in kind of fantasy movies or even kind of fantasy horror films. But just go prepared, I feel. If you go in prepared, not expecting some action, fantasy, you know, kind of like lots of kind of stuff happening on screen, then you'll be better prepared to maybe enjoy what's happening, because you won't be kind of expecting to see something to happen. And I feel that's the key here. If you kind of know that you're looking at more of an arty piece rather than a kind of fantasy adventure, you can better appreciate it. And in that respect, I feel it deserves a 6 out of 10 for me. So a complex but basic film at the same time. 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.